do better. Drew, I hate the way you do things and the way our brain works. These are some of the phrases that would run through my mind on a daily basis. According to monumentum.org, 92% of people are affected with perfectionism. I am definitely one of them. I've always had the tendency to do everything from very high standards set to me by myself. Today I will talk about the psych part of perfectionism, how it affected me personally, and how I've coped. First, let's start off with the psych part of perfectionism. Perfectionism can be confusing. Now, don't look at perfectionists as people who do things perfectly, because we don't. We are individuals who set very high expectations for ourselves, and maybe even for others. We believe we should be able to achieve things effortlessly without making any mistakes or having flaws. Our standards are most likely unrealistic or unattainable, which makes it unacceptable when we don't reach our version of perfect. Some of the positives of perfectionism, according to Monumentum, or according to Harvard Business Review, are higher levels of motivation, doing good in school, paying attention to detail, and greater levels of perseverance. With a positive, there's usually a negative. So some of the cons are being very critical, unproductive, unhappy, and struggling to figure out what's really important. One of the negatives I really struggled with was procrastination or being unproductive. Perfectionists are procrastinators because we have a fear of not completing a task perfectly, so then we put it off for longer. I don't look at procrastination as being lazy, but more of a misguided sense of activity. Second, we'll talk about how it affected me personally. First, it started off with small things like having high expectations for myself. I've had this feeling for my entire life. So with my mom, she's very relaxed and runs on her own time, which makes her late to some things. So it would really make me angry when she wouldn't pick me up on time or make sure I had everything ready for the next day. Then I started to turn all of these expectations on myself with grades or normal daily tasks. Daily tasks could include as simple as my handwriting, my schoolwork, or any mistake I would make throughout the day. All of a sudden, everything that was supposed to be fun wasn't, including my favorite sport, basketball. This affected me the most in basketball. In sports, it affected me the most in basketball. Every time I would make a mistake, all of my emotions would get so bottled up and my control would just get less and less. It also didn't help that I kept an imaginary scoreboard in the back of my brain, and this scoreboard would keep track of things like my points, fouls, steals, or any other stat. As this continued, I would just have a full-on breakdown with being so overwhelmed. This would also sometimes happen in volleyball, but just not as intensely. Lastly, we'll discuss how I've coped. It is okay to have perfectionism. It was a long journey for me to cope with perfectionism, but I started going to see someone and she gave me lots of tips and reminders. First, she reminded me that instead of focusing on the negative, focus on what I'm doing well and go from there. Second, she helped me become more aware of my tendencies, meaning understanding my patterns and recognizing how I let perfectionism negatively affect my life. Lastly, it's okay to make mistakes because they help us grow and give us more opportunities. She also gave me a healthy alternative term called excellencism. It helps you work towards excellence rather than perfectionism. This involves setting high expectations but not being so critical when you don't achieve them. Excellencism takes the best parts of perfectionism and lets go of the toxic parts. This high jump represents what it felt like to have perfectionism. All of those high expectations just out of reach, struggling to try and get over the high jump or my expectations. As I did the things to help me cope and kept hope in the back of my mind, things started to get better and I finally achieved jumping past the toxic things. To this day, I still struggle with perfectionism, but keeping those reminders in the back of my mind, it helps me not to get so overwhelmed and panicked. To conclude, I talked about the psych part of perfectionism, how it affected me personally, and how I've coped. Overall, perfectionism is a complex personality trait that has both positive and negative outcomes. It is important for individuals to recognize when their perfectionism is causing them distress or interfering with their goals, and to seek support and resources to help them manage this trait. Now just remember, it is okay